Have you ever picked up a piece of clothing as a joke, only to discover that putting it back was impossible? What if one simple dress didn't just change the way someone looked, but quietly changed the way they saw themselves forever? Most people believe cross-dressing starts with confidence. The truth is, for many, it starts with curiosity, fear, and a single heartbeat that feels louder than common sense. This story isn't about magic, hypnosis, or being forced into anything. It's about the unexpected emotions that can appear when someone finally allows themselves to explore a hidden side they've ignored for years. Stay until the end, because the final choice isn't about wearing a dress at all. It's about discovering which version of yourself feels impossible to walk away from. Ethan had always considered himself an ordinary man. 28 years old, a quiet graphic designer, someone who preferred staying home over loud parties. His apartment reflected that personality perfectly. Everything was organized, neutral colors covered every wall, and his wardrobe contained nothing but jeans, hoodies, trainers, and office shirts. Predictable, safe, comfortable. Yet every now and then, while walking through shopping centers, his eyes would drift toward women's fashion displays for just a second longer than necessary. Soft fabrics, elegant cuts, beautiful colors, they fascinated him in a way he could never explain. He always looked away quickly. Just curiosity, he would whisper to himself. Months passed like that. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Ethan agreed to help his older sister Emma clear out boxes before she moved into a new house. Cardboard boxes filled every room. Clothes were scattered everywhere as she sorted donations from things she planned to keep. Take whatever you want, Emma laughed while sealing another box. Even if it's something ridiculous. Ethan chuckled. I'm pretty sure none of your clothes would fit me. She rolled her eyes. You'd be surprised. Hours later, Emma left to pick up lunch, leaving Ethan alone with half-packed wardrobes and complete silence. While carrying another box toward the hallway, something caught his attention. A navy blue dress hung separately on the wardrobe door. It wasn't flashy. No glitter. No dramatic design. Just simple, elegant, beautiful. The fabric looked unbelievably soft beneath the afternoon light. He reached toward it before stopping himself. What am I doing? His hand pulled back instantly. He laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. But curiosity refused to disappear. He touched the sleeve. Smooth, cool, different from anything he'd ever worn. His heart started beating faster. No one was home. No cameras. No audience. Just one dress. One empty apartment. One impossible question. What would it actually feel like? The thought terrified him. It also refused to leave. He looked toward the front door. Still locked. He checked the windows. Closed. His breathing became slower as he carefully lifted the dress from the hanger. It felt surprisingly light. Almost weightless. He stood there for nearly 2 full minutes before finally whispering, just once. He changed quickly, convinced he would regret it immediately. Instead, the zipper closed. The fabric rested naturally against his body. He slowly looked into the bedroom mirror. Silence. Complete silence. He expected laughter, embarrassment, cringe. Instead, he simply stared, not because he suddenly believed he looked feminine. Not because everything was perfect, but because something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, he couldn't stop smiling. It wasn't about pretending to be someone else. It wasn't about becoming a different person. It was about allowing himself to experience something he'd forbidden himself from even imagining. His shoulders relaxed. His breathing slowed. The anxiety that usually filled his mind almost disappeared. He gently brushed the fabric with both hands. So, this is why. The sentence escaped before he realized he'd spoken aloud. He understood nothing. Yet somehow, everything made sense. He walked carefully across the room. Every movement felt different. More deliberate. More graceful. Not forced. Just different. He caught himself adjusting the skirt naturally. That surprised him most. He wasn't acting. He wasn't copying anyone. He was simply responding to how the clothing moved. He looked back into the mirror again. Instead of focusing on whether he appeared masculine or feminine, he focused on how peaceful he looked. That frightened him. Because peace was something he'd struggled to find for years. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway shattered the moment.
Emma.
Panic exploded through his body. He rushed toward the bedroom, nearly tripping over the hem before quickly changing back into his jeans and hoodie. His hands shook while hanging the dress exactly where he'd found it. By the time Emma walked through the front door carrying takeaway bags, Ethan was sitting on the sofa pretending to scroll through his phone. "You okay?" she asked. "You look flushed." "I'm fine." "You sure?" "Just tired." She smiled without questioning him further. But during lunch, Ethan barely heard the conversation. His mind kept returning to that mirror, to that unexpected smile, to the strange calm he'd felt wearing something he'd always believed wasn't meant for him. Driving home later that evening, he couldn't stop thinking about the dress. Not because he wanted to impress anyone, not because he wanted attention, because for 10 quiet minutes, he had stopped judging himself. And somehow, that feeling had stolen his heart. The following week became a battle Ethan never expected to fight. Every morning he told himself the experience was over, that it had simply been an odd moment of curiosity. Every evening, though, his thoughts drifted back to that navy blue dress. He wasn't thinking about how he looked. He was thinking about how he had felt.
Calm.
Comfortable. Free from the constant pressure to act a certain way. He tried distracting himself with work. New projects filled his computer screen, deadlines piled up, and meetings occupied his afternoons. But whenever he opened a design website, colorful fabrics or elegant fashion photography caught his attention for a second longer than before. It frustrated him. "Why can't I stop thinking about this?" he muttered one night. The answer never came. A few days later, while walking through the city after work, rain began pouring unexpectedly. Ethan ducked into a shopping center to wait for it to pass. He wandered aimlessly until he found himself standing outside a clothing boutique. He froze. The front display featured several simple dresses on mannequins. Nothing extravagant. Soft pastel colors, flowing skirts, and elegant cuts. The same peaceful feeling returned, and his heartbeat quickened. "Just keep walking," he whispered. Instead, he stepped inside. The shop was quiet. Gentle music played overhead, and only one assistant was folding sweaters near the entrance. Ethan kept his eyes lowered as he browsed, pretending he was looking for a gift. He picked up a soft cream cardigan, then a long skirt, then another dress. The fabrics fascinated him.
Cotton. Satin.
Chiffon. Each one felt completely different beneath his fingertips. "Can I help you?" a cheerful voice asked. Ethan nearly jumped.
"Oh,
"I'm just looking." The assistant smiled kindly. "Take your time." There was no judgment in her voice. No suspicious expression. She simply walked away. That tiny moment surprised Ethan more than anything else. He had imagined people staring, whispering, laughing. Instead, nobody cared. He left the shop without buying anything, but something had changed. The fear he'd carried for years suddenly seemed larger than reality itself. That evening, curiosity won again. He searched online for articles written by people who enjoyed crossdressing. Instead of sensational stories, he found thoughtful posts from ordinary people. Some described it as creative expression. Others enjoyed the fashion, the fabrics, or the chance to relax outside everyday expectations. Many emphasized that clothing doesn't define a person's identity and that everyone has different reasons for enjoying it. Ethan spent hours reading. For the first time, he realized he wasn't alone. Thousands of people had experienced the same confusing mix of excitement, guilt, curiosity, and relief. He wasn't strange. He wasn't broken. He was simply learning something new about himself. The following weekend, after debating for nearly an hour, Ethan opened his laptop again. His finger hovered above the keyboard. Finally, he typed 3 simple words. Simple black dress. Hundreds of options appeared. He immediately closed the browser.
No.
5 minutes later, he opened it again. This time he added a cardigan, a pair of leggings, and simple ballet flats to the basket. Nothing flashy. Nothing designed to attract attention. Just comfortable clothes he genuinely liked. His finger hovered over the checkout button. His heart pounded so loudly he could hear it. What if someone finds out? What if the delivery driver recognizes me? What if this changes everything? He closed his eyes, then clicked. Order confirmed. The words on the screen felt almost unreal. For the next 4 days, he checked the tracking page constantly. Every notification made his pulse race. Part of him hoped the parcel would be delayed forever. Another part counted every remaining hour. When the package finally arrived, he waited until evening before opening it. The cardboard box looked completely ordinary. No one passing by would have guessed what was inside. His hands trembled as he carefully removed each item. The cardigan felt softer than he remembered. The leggings stretched comfortably between his fingers. Then came the dress. Simple, elegant, exactly what he'd imagined. He changed slowly this time, paying attention to every detail instead of rushing. The leggings fit comfortably. The cardigan rested naturally on his shoulders. Finally, he slipped into the dress and stood silently in front of the full-length mirror. He didn't rush to judge himself. Instead, he smiled. He experimented with posture, noticing how standing straighter changed the overall look. He practiced walking naturally instead of taking exaggerated steps. He discovered that relaxed movements looked far more graceful than trying to imitate anyone else. He even laughed at himself after nearly stumbling while turning too quickly. "This takes practice," he said with a grin. Rather than feeling embarrassed, he found himself enjoying the learning process. Over the next hour, Ethan explored small details he'd never considered before. He learned how different fabrics draped, how colors changed the mood of an outfit, and how confidence came less from appearance and more from feeling comfortable in what he wore. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about convincing anyone. It was about authenticity. Before changing back into his everyday clothes, Ethan looked into the mirror one last time. The fear that had once filled his eyes was fading. In its place was curiosity. Not because he had all the answers, but because he finally had permission to ask the questions he'd spent years avoiding. As he carefully folded the dress and placed it neatly in his wardrobe, he whispered with a quiet smile, "I think this is only the beginning." Little did he know, the next step wouldn't happen inside his apartment. It would happen outside, where confidence would be tested in ways no mirror could ever prepare him for. For the next several weeks, Ethan settled into a quiet routine that belonged only to him. During the day, he was the same dependable graphic designer everyone knew. He met deadlines, joined video calls, joked with colleagues, and blended into the familiar rhythm of everyday life. But in the evenings, once his apartment door closed behind him, another part of his world quietly came alive. He no longer rushed to put on the dress. Instead, he treated the entire experience with patience. He learned that confidence wasn't something you wore. It was something you built. One evening, he experimented with different color combinations, discovering that soft neutral shades made him feel surprisingly relaxed. Another night, he practiced walking naturally across his living room, noticing how posture made a bigger difference than expensive clothes ever could. He realized that slowing down his movements felt more elegant than trying to imitate anyone else's style. He also made plenty of mistakes. He ordered shoes that were a size too small. He bought a blouse that looked completely different under natural light than it had on the website. He laughed after spending 20 minutes trying to understand how a wrap dress actually worked before finally watching a simple tutorial online. Each mistake became part of the learning process. The more he explored, the less it felt like pretending. It simply became another creative hobby, one that allowed him to appreciate fashion in a completely new way. One Saturday morning, Ethan stood in front of his wardrobe holding 2 hangers, his favorite black dress, and his usual jeans. He stared at them for several minutes. A thought entered his mind that immediately frightened him. What if I stepped outside? His heart instantly rejected the idea.
No.
Too risky. Too embarrassing. Someone might recognize him. Someone might laugh. He quickly put the dress away. Yet the question refused to disappear. Over the following days, he found himself planning imaginary situations. Maybe just a quiet walk at night. Maybe driving somewhere far from home. Maybe visiting a place where nobody knew him. Every scenario ended the same way.
Fear.
Not because of the clothes themselves, because of other people's opinions. One evening, While reading stories from experienced crossdressers, one sentence stood out. Confidence begins long before you open the front door. Ethan read it 3 times. The writer explained that rushing into public too quickly often created unnecessary anxiety. Building confidence gradually through self-acceptance, realistic expectations, and small personal goals made the experience far more enjoyable. That advice stayed with him. Instead of forcing himself outside immediately, Ethan focused on becoming comfortable with himself first. He improved his skincare routine. He learned basic color coordination. He practiced speaking kindly to himself whenever self-doubt appeared. The biggest lesson surprised him. Every time he criticized himself in the mirror, he noticed how tense he became. Every time he smiled instead, everything changed. A week later, something unexpected happened. Emma invited him to dinner. As they ate, she studied him for a moment. "You seem happier lately." Ethan nearly dropped his fork. "What makes you say that?" "I don't know." She smiled. "You laugh more. You seem less stressed. You've even started taking better care of yourself." He looked down at his plate. She wasn't wrong. Without realizing it, exploring fashion had encouraged him to care more about himself overall. Better sleep, healthier meals, regular exercise, a proper skincare routine. Even his posture had improved. None of those changes had anything to do with hiding. They came from finally investing time in himself. Emma smiled again. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Her words stayed with him long after dinner ended. That night he stood before the mirror wearing his favorite outfit. Simple black dress, light cardigan, comfortable flats. Nothing dramatic. He looked peaceful, not perfect, just comfortable. Then his phone buzzed. A notification from a local shopping center appeared. Late night summer market, open until midnight. He stared at the screen. His breathing slowed. Late night, smaller crowds, people busy enjoying themselves. A thought appeared. This could be my chance. Fear answered immediately. What if someone notices? Another voice quietly responded. They probably won't. He paced around his apartment for nearly 30 minutes. Then he made a decision. Not tonight, but soon. Instead of feeling disappointed, he felt proud. Weeks earlier, the idea of even imagining going outside had been impossible. Now it felt achievable. Progress wasn't measured by distance. It was measured by courage. The following weekend arrived with clear skies and a gentle evening breeze. Ethan spent nearly an hour choosing an outfit that felt natural rather than attention-grabbing. A soft navy dress, white trainers instead of heels, a lightweight cardigan, minimal accessories. He wanted comfort above everything else. Standing at his apartment door, keys in one hand and courage in the other, he rested his fingers on the handle. His heartbeat echoed through the silent hallway. Every fear he'd ever imagined waited on the opposite side. He slowly opened the door. Cool evening air brushed against his face. The corridor looked exactly as it always had. Quiet, empty. Nothing had changed. Except him. He stepped into the hallway. One step, then another. The apartment door clicked shut behind him. For a brief second, Ethan smiled. Not because he knew what would happen next, but because he had finally discovered that the biggest barrier had never been the world outside. It had always been the fear inside his own mind. As he walked toward the lift, unaware that a single unexpected encounter was about to challenge everything he had learned, he realized the dress hadn't stolen his heart after all. It had simply helped him find the courage to listen to it. The lift doors opened with a soft chime, and Ethan stepped inside. His reflection in the polished steel walls immediately caught his attention. Just a few weeks earlier, he would have stared at every flaw, every feature he wished looked different. Tonight was different. He simply smiled at the person looking back. Not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time he wasn't trying to fight himself. As the lift reached the ground floor, his heart began racing again. The doors slid open. The outside world was waiting. He took a slow breath and walked into the warm evening air. The streets were alive with people heading to restaurants, families enjoying the cool breeze, couples laughing as they wandered between small market stalls. Ethan expected every eye to turn toward him. None did. Everyone seemed busy living their own lives. That simple realization eased the tension in his shoulders. He walked at a comfortable pace, resisting the urge to rush. He remembered the advice he had read online. Confidence grows when you stop imagining that everyone is watching you. After 10 minutes, he arrived at the summer market. Strings of warm lights hung overhead, music drifted through the air, and the scent of fresh coffee mixed with baked pastries. The atmosphere felt welcoming rather than intimidating. He wandered from stall to stall, admiring handmade jewelry, artwork, scented candles, and colorful scarves. Without noticing, he stopped thinking about how he looked and started enjoying where he was. A small jeweler's stall caught his attention. An elderly woman smiled warmly. "Looking for anything special?" Ethan hesitated. "I'm just browsing." "That's the best way to find something," she replied with a laugh. She showed him a simple silver bracelet with a tiny heart charm. "I make these by hand." "It's beautiful," Ethan said honestly. "It suits gentle people." He smiled. "I'll take it." As she wrapped the bracelet, she looked up kindly. "You've got a lovely smile. Don't hide it." Those 5 words stayed with Ethan long after he walked away. She hadn't commented on his clothes. She hadn't questioned him. She simply treated him like any other customer. For the rest of the evening, Ethan relaxed more with every step. He bought a coffee. He sat on a quiet bench overlooking the market. He watched children chasing bubbles through the lights while musicians played nearby. For the first time in years, he felt completely present. No pretending, no overthinking, just living. On his way home, something unexpected happened. As he waited at a pedestrian crossing, a young woman standing beside him glanced at his cardigan. "I love that color," she said with a smile. Ethan blinked. "Oh, thank you. It really suits you." The traffic light changed. She waved politely and continued walking in the opposite direction. That was it. No awkward questions. No laughter. No dramatic confrontation. Just an ordinary compliment between 2 strangers. Ethan laughed quietly to himself. Weeks of fear and reality had been surprisingly ordinary. Back home, he hung the dress carefully in his wardrobe. He didn't treat it like a secret anymore. He treated it with appreciation. Over the following months, crossdressing became one of several hobbies that enriched his life. He explored different styles, learned more about fabrics, improved his fashion sense, and even became more confident in everyday situations. Friends noticed he seemed happier, more relaxed, and more comfortable expressing himself creatively. One afternoon, Emma visited unexpectedly. As they organized books on a shelf, she noticed the wardrobe door was slightly open. Inside hung several neatly arranged dresses, skirts, and cardigans. She looked at Ethan. He froze. His heart pounded louder than ever. Finally, he spoke. "I've been meaning to tell you. I enjoy wearing them." "I know it probably sounds strange." Emma remained silent for a few seconds. Then she smiled. "I wondered." Ethan stared at her. "You knew?" "I didn't know for certain." She laughed softly. "But after the day we packed my house, I noticed that navy dress had been hanging differently." Ethan's face turned bright red. "You never said anything." "It wasn't my place." She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." He let out the deepest breath he'd taken in months. "I was terrified." "I know." She smiled. "But you're still my little brother. Clothes don't change that." Emotion filled Ethan's eyes. Years of fear disappeared in a single conversation. That evening they talked for hours, not only about clothes, but about confidence, self-expression, fear, and the pressure people often place on themselves to fit into narrow expectations. Emma listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and encouraging Ethan to keep exploring what made him genuinely happy. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan stopped measuring his happiness by other people's expectations. Some days he wore jeans and a hoodie. Other days he enjoyed wearing a dress at home or when attending welcoming social gatherings. He realized that clothing was simply another way to express creativity and personality. It didn't have to define every part of who he was. Looking back, he often thought about that rainy afternoon in Emma's apartment. One dress, one moment of curiosity, one glance into a mirror. He had believed the dress stole his heart. Now he understood the truth. The dress hadn't stolen anything. It had quietly unlocked a door he had kept closed for years. Behind that door wasn't a different person. It was the same Ethan, kinder to himself, more confident, more authentic, and finally free from the fear of exploring what brought him joy. If there's one lesson his journey taught him, it's this: confidence doesn't appear the moment you put on different clothes. It grows every time you choose honesty over fear, curiosity over shame, and self-acceptance over self-judgment. Sometimes the smallest step, a single outfit, a quiet smile, or the courage to look in the mirror without criticism, can begin a journey that changes your life in ways you never imagined. And every time Ethan opened his wardrobe after that, he smiled, not because of the dresses hanging inside, but because they reminded him of the day he finally stopped hiding from himself. The dress that once seemed to steal his heart had actually given it back.